You can be the Babe Ruth of wrestling and still have something to prove. That's the way I felt on March 17th, 2002 at WrestleMania 18 in the Toronto Sky Dome. I had something to prove to myself and a lot of other people, and there was only one place I could do it, in the ring, against a guy called The Rock, in front of nearly 70,000 screaming fans. It was already preordained that The Rock would win this Clash of Titans. We both knew he was coming out on top that night. But that didn't make my job any easier. If anything, it made it harder. It would have been simple if all I had to do was put a boot to his face and let a leg drop on him and strut around afterwards like I owned the place. Yeah, that would have been a piece of cake. Unfortunately, that wasn't the way it was supposed to go down. I was supposed to lose the match, but I was supposed to do it in a way that made even bigger stars out of both of us. And that was going to take some doing, brother. Losing this match the way I needed to lose it was going to be a lot harder for me, a lot more complicated, a lot more demanding of my skills as a wrestler and as an entertainer than anything I've done before. Because this wasn't just a wrestling match. For me, there was something bigger at stake. 2 years earlier, I left another wrestling organization under a black cloud. Basically, I was kicked out of my ass and told I'd never wrestle for them again, that I was a has-been who could never be the attraction I used to be. All of a sudden, my music started, and I walked through the curtain and down the ramp. An ocean of people waving signs and cheering for me at the top of their lungs. And millions more on pay-per-view at home. Bad enough all these people in the wrestling business were waiting for me to slip on a banana peel so they could say, "We told you so. He's too old. He's too bald-headed. He doesn't have it anymore." So as I made my way down to the ring with the music thundering and all the lights on me, all I could think was, God, now I really better not screw up.
Gentlemen, Hulk Hogan.
My mom and dad met about as far away from the Toronto Sky Dome as you can get, down in Central America, in the Panama Canal Zone. My dad, Pete Bolea, had gone down to Panama to work as a pipe fitter. My mom, whose name was Ruth, was a secretary working for the Navy. For a while, our family lived in Augusta, Georgia, where I was born on August 11th, 1953. I came into the world not as Hulk Hogan, but as Terry Bollea. About 9 months later, we all moved to Tampa. By the time I got into first grade, I was pretty chubby. I couldn't do as many push-ups as the other kids. I had a problem when it came time to climb a rope, and I ran like I was pulling a piano. Whenever games were played at school, I was the last one to be picked. Nobody wanted a kid on their team who looked like a Goodyear blimp. And it wasn't just in sports that the kids didn't want to pick me. Every other Friday, this teacher would roll out an amplifier and a record player and make us dance with the girls. Of course, the girls got to choose who they wanted to dance with, and they never wanted to dance with me. They danced with just about anybody but me. And it wasn't just my weight that made me different. I remember in first grade, a girl named Sarah with glasses and curly blonde hair shared a desk with me. On the first day of school, she sat down and stared at me for a minute like I was some kind of freak. Then she said, "Has your head always been that big?" My head was huge, all right, probably the same size as it is right now, but I didn't need her to point it out to me. Fortunately, there were ways I could excel, even if I was a fat kid with a big head. One of those ways was bowling. From the time I was 8 years old until I was 12, I teamed up with a kid named Vic Pettit, who later became a professional bowler. One of the reasons we became such good bowlers was there was a bowling alley just 5 blocks away from my house. It was called Panorama, and Vic and I would go there every week without fail. Of course, there was another sport I loved to death, but never in my wildest dreams thought I'd participate in. That was wrestling. From the first time I saw it on TV as a very little kid, I was hooked. By the age of 6 or 7, I started looking for it every week. My hero was Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream. I'd sit home on Sundays to watch the local wrestling show, and if they didn't have Dusty Rhodes on, I'd be real pissed off. I'd start stomping around the house and cussing under my breath. Pretty soon, I talked my father into taking me to see the matches at the Armory on Tuesday nights. It was better than TV, that's for damn sure. The wrestlers were like Greek gods to me. They were giants, larger than life, and the combination of entertainment and physicality that I saw in the wrestling ring was something I'd never seen in other sports. And that was where it all started for me. Of course, I had other heroes. If you were a baseball player when I was a kid, you had to worship the New York Yankees. There was Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, Yogi Berra, Joe Pepitone. And because the Cincinnati Reds had their spring training camp in Tampa, I liked Pete Rose and Johnny Bench a lot too. But Dusty Rhodes, he was it, brother. He was the real deal. Dusty Rhodes was the first guy in Florida to do a show business thing in the ring. He had a Muhammad Ali type rap. Dusty Rhodes, the Tower of Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour. He was a white guy, but he talked like a black guy, and it worked for him. And then there was a promoter, Eddie Graham. I didn't know he was the promoter at the time, of course. I thought he was just a wrestler like everybody else. But Eddie Graham was one of my heroes too. The bad guys came through the Ox Baker, Pak Song Nam, the Giant Korean, the Missouri Mauler, the Assassins, Joe LeDuc, Crusher Verdue. Every bad guy monster wrestler showed up at one time or another. And they were all big men, 300 pounds, and hairy as hell. What I know now is that a lot of the good guys lived in Florida, and the bad guys' job was to come in from time to time and make the good guys look good, like bigger stars than they really were. I saw Andre the Giant wrestle at the Armory. I saw Haystacks Calhoun. The parade of talent was awesome. It was unbelievable. By the time I got to high school, I was watching wrestling in person twice a week. On Tuesday nights, I'd go to the Armory, and on Wednesday afternoons, I'd see the same guys at a place called the Sportatorium in downtown Tampa. I ran down there every chance I got. Hell, I purposely set up my schedule so after lunch I would have phys ed, a shop class, and then study hall. Nothing classes I could blow off to go see the wrestlers. Then about 2 o'clock when the matches were over, I'd haul my ass back to Robinson High School and park my car without anybody noticing. The last thing we had to do was go back to our homeroom, and I always managed to make it back there in time. But I never imagined I'd become a wrestler. I knew my physical limitations. If I was so fat I couldn't outrun anybody, how could I ever get in the ring and wrestle? So I put that possibility out of my mind, even though at the same time, I was drawn to it like a hunk of iron to a giant magnet. Music has always been one of the great passions of my life, almost as big as wrestling. By the time I got to 9th grade, I was known for my guitar playing. and I got my first little band together. We called it Infinity's End. At first we were just screwing around, and then we started getting dates to play at parties on the weekends, and we were booked up almost all the time. For a bunch of kids, we did all right for ourselves. We knew everything that was on the radio, and we had 2 guitar players, a drummer, a bass player, and a keyboard player, which was pretty intense for a 9th grade band. When I got into high school, I started playing in even better bands, and that became my job, my income. By the time I was in 11th or 12th grade, we're talking 1970 or so, I was making like $400 a week. That was a lot of bread back then. Nowadays it'd be like a couple of grand. When I started playing regular with a real good local band at a place called the Islands Club on Davis Island, I moved out of my parents' house. That was part way through my senior year of high school, and I never moved back. The Islands Club attracted a lot of good-looking women that were too old for me. It also attracted a lot of athletes from the University of Tampa. I remember John Matuzak, who wound up playing for the Oakland Raiders, would come by a lot. The same with Paul Orndorff, another tremendous athlete at the university. And then something weird happened. Wrestlers started showing up. These guys that I had watched and idolized all my life started coming to the Islands Club. Instead of them entertaining me, I was the one entertaining them. Like I said, it was weird. It was right about the time the wrestlers started showing up that my friend Scott Thornton's car broke down, and he asked me if I would give him a ride to the gym. It was Hector's Gym on Platt Street in a really tough area of Tampa. But he was a good friend of mine, so I gave him a ride down there, and he convinced me to go in with him. I saw right away that there were 3 or 4 guys in the gym, and they all looked up at me like they wanted to kill me. They were like mountain men, each one bigger than the other, with wide muscular backs and hair all over their bodies. I was scared to death when I saw them look at me that way. But then they were nice to me. They told me to come on in and hang out. The next day, I came back to the gym and signed up. I was tired of being fat. I went to the beach a lot, but I couldn't take my shirt off because my pecs looked like a woman's tits, and I was even more tired of not having a girlfriend. I never pictured myself going to a gym, but when I started working out at Hector's, I found I enjoyed it, and I kept at it, thinking that someday I might even get in respectable enough shape for a girl to give me a chance. So the motivation there was definitely the opposite sex. Then right after I started working out at Hector's, another weird thing happened. Some of the wrestlers started showing up there. So now I was bumping into them at the Islands Club and at Hector's Gym. At first, it was very intimidating working out alongside these guys. Whenever one of them would walk in, I would immediately break into a cold sweat. It wasn't just that they were physically imposing. It was that, in my wrestling fan's mind, these guys had such a powerful mystique to them. Still, you eventually get used to any environment, and after a while I started getting accustomed to the one in Hector's Gym. I became a regular there, and little by little, I got in shape. I even got up the courage to talk to some of the wrestlers, and the more I talked to them, the more I glimpsed of that world, the more my interest in wrestling grew. Then you couldn't call it even an interest anymore, because it was starting to turn into an obsession. I was possessed by it, brother. I ate and slept and dreamed about wrestling 24 hours a day. And I got this idea in my head, this crazy far-fetched idea that if I lifted enough weights and stuck to my diet and trained hard enough, maybe, just maybe, I could do a little wrestling myself. I'd been talking to the wrestlers down at Hector's and made friends with a few of them, and found out there was a bar where they would go after they wrestled on Tuesday nights. It was called the Imperial Room. So I made it my business to go to the Imperial Room after the matches on Tuesday nights. I would have a drink there with the wrestlers, the ones that were friendly enough to talk to me. Some of them were still playing games with me, saying, "Get out of here, kid," and that type of thing. But I made enough contacts where I felt comfortable approaching a guy named Mike Graham. He was the son of Eddie Graham, the promoter, and he had been a couple years ahead of me in school as I was growing up. One night, Mike Graham came up to me in the Imperial Room and said, "So, you want to be a wrestler? Well, I could set you up with Hiro Matsuda, this Japanese guy. He'll make sure you're in shape, make sure you're tough enough. If you can pass his test, you might have a chance." Hell, I knew who Hiro Matsuda was. I'd watched him for many years as a kid, and for some of those years, he was a Southern heavyweight champion. He didn't just use the established wrestling moves in the ring. He also used karate moves, which was a pretty unusual approach in those days. Let me tell you, brother, I was pumped to work out with Hiro Matsuda. I was ready for anything. Little did I know what he had in mind for me.